Okay then, so welcome to this class on searching and filtering your data. As you can see, I've got the screen open here in just a blank sample manager screen, and when you open most of your Qualoupe screens, they don't load with the data in them. There are one or two exceptions, but the majority of them, it doesn't automatically load the data. The reason for this is you might have thousands of records in your database and you don't want to drag them all back to the screen when you open it, because you might just want to input a new record. You might not actually want to look at existing data. If you do want to look at existing data, we have a Load Records button which you click. So if we click on this, it opens up our Select Records to Load dialog, and this looks the same in all the applications. It's the same sort of thing. Obviously the columns will be different depending on which application you're in. So because we're in the sample manager, there's fields that we can see on sample. There's quite a lot of data in here, but some of it's a bit peculiar, so if we find some strange values, forgive me for that. So one of the things we see here is we've got two tabs. We have commonly selected records and full database search. And full database search has got an exclamation mark on it, and it tells us there are 1,147 samples. And the reason there's an exclamation mark is because we've decided that's probably quite a lot of samples to load up in one go. So we would expect somebody to do a search to restrict the data. I think it varies, but I think the maximum number you'd get in commonly selected records is about 200 samples, which is quite enough samples to flick through manually without going off and doing a search. On the commonly selected records, this automatically populates with records that you've seen most recently and records that you've looked at frequently, and this list will automatically populate itself. And if I was to keep looking at this first sample, it sort of makes its way to the top of the list and it stays at the top of the list, and if I look at other samples less frequently, they'll gradually drop down to the bottom of the list, and it sorts itself. So the easiest way to load data into your database, in your application, is to highlight the samples you're interested in. So if I just click on one or two, a little check mark appears and I go confirm selection, and those records load. So down the left hand side of the screen we now have a navigation panel. So if I click on that, it will take me to the next sample that I've clicked on. If the navigation panel gets in your way, if you click on the X, it'll close it, and it's minimized so you can still go through the records by clicking on the arrows. It'll take you to the next record, and if you want to go back to the navigation panel, you can click on this little button here and it'll bring it back again. So if I go back to load records, cherry picking the samples is the easiest way to do it, and hopefully the things you've looked at most recently will be at the top of the list. But sometimes you might want to search for something specifically. So the next level of searching you can do is you can sort the records. So if I click on sample ID, it sorts alphanumerically in that column. If I click on status, it will sort by status. Same sort of thing. If I click on specification, it sorts alphanumerically by specification. You'll see some of my samples don't have a specification, and alphanumerically blank goes to the top of the list. So if you sort them and then select some samples to go in, confirm my selection, oops, let's open that again, they'll actually be loaded in the same value that you sorted them in your load records. So that's the simplest form. Just have a look at what's in the commonly selected records and select what you like. Oh, I should say you can highlight one, go down to another sample down here, and if I hit the Shift key on the keyboard, it will select the whole lot like a block. So I can click some of these. So anyway, I can load them up like that. I'm going to cancel the load and go back in again. Load records. So the next thing I can do in here is I can actually perform a filter. So, oh, I've lost my filter window. That's peculiar. Where has my filter gone? Hang on a moment. I'm going to go out and reload it. It was there earlier. I seem to have done something strange to it. So I'm just reloading the sample program again anyway. Slowly reloading the sample program. Okay, so I'll go back into load records. That's what I was missing. For some reason I'd lost my little filters across here. I think it's because I've been doing multiple searches and closing it and opening it and closing it and opening it. So if I wanted to filter to only see some of the values in this column, I could type in a value to filter on. So if I go AC, it's filtering down to only the records that have AC in them. Now that's not actually visible on here, but if I scroll across, we can see it's found AC test material, AC test spec. So if you put your filter in, it will immediately start to reduce the data that you can see by the term you put in there. So what else? We've got all these ones that say class 2. So if I put in class, and it's automatically filtered to class 2. I don't know if there's any other class ones. Yeah. So, and say I only wanted to find samples that began with a 4. So if I type in 4, it filters to everything with a 4 in it, 4, 9. So it's found me the 4 9s. So then if I only wanted to find the class 2 in the 4 9s, I could put in class in there. And what it's doing is it says, find me data that contains 4 9 and contains the string class. So these all start 4 9 and it's class 2. If I take that one out, and instead of putting it there I put a comma and put the word class there, it's going to find me everything with 4 9 in it or everything with the word class in it. So if you use a comma, it's the same as find me this or this, or if I put it into here, it's both conditions must be met. So it's find me this and this. So it's the difference between them. And obviously we've got 3 and clauses across here. So you could put in 49 class. I don't know what I'm going to put in here. So that's finding me 49 and class, and I could put in some of these 49s have got 25, so if I put 25 it reduces the data down. So you can use combinations of comma lists which will find you everything in the list, and then in another field other values which will find you where those conditions are met and those conditions are met. The other thing I was going to say in here was we've got these class 2. So if I put in 2, it's going to find me class 2, but it's going to find me all the 2s everywhere else in the database because the filter filters across all the fields. So there's some 2s in there. So it might not be very obvious. So if we wanted to filter for a string that ended in 2, if we put a tilde symbol, which is this little squiggly thing, it's going to find me all the ones that end in 2. That hasn't made an awful lot of difference because they all end in 2 anyway by the look of it. It's because of the format of this sample ID. So let's see what else. I'm not familiar with this data. I'll just have a swift look. Spec. Okay, we've got spec 2 pending. If I stick in something a little bit more arbitrary, that's going to find me lots of values, it's going to find me P anywhere in any of these strings. But if I actually only wanted to find pending, I could type in pending, and it will search to only find those. But oops, I've clicked on something. It's doing something. Oh, I think I've reset it. Drat. Inaccurate mousing from me, that is. Back in again. If you want to tie it to find an exact phrase, or to start with a certain number of characters, or stop with it, or the string finish with a certain number of characters, you pin it by using a tilde symbol. And when this reloads, I'll show you that. Unfortunately, the reloading's a bit slow today. Here we go. Load records. So if I put in tilde, whoops, tilde PE, it's only going to find me strings that start with PE, but it's found, so it's found me pending, but it's also found me per gram. So it is doing that. So the tilde at the beginning means it won't search anywhere in any string, it'll just search at the beginning of strings. If you put space 2 tilde, it'll only find me the things that end with space. Yeah, it'll only find me the things that end with space 2, so I don't know what's happening with those two. So if I scroll across, we'll probably find there's a condition 2, so there's some other data which is bringing those back. If you wanted to literally find some text, I could put in tilde plus 2 tilde, and it will only find me records where one of the fields contains literally that piece of text. So it's the same as putting it in quote marks. I hope that's clear anyway. So tilde at the beginning to say the string that you're searching for must begin with these characters. At the end, must end with these characters, and on either side, literally. And if this will find lots of records. If we just have tilde tilde, it will find me records that contain some empty fields. In other words, tilde tilde is an empty string. It's an interesting character to choose that, but that's the one they've chosen. I think it's to avoid confusion with Windows, because that has different connotations. In Windows, a star means multiply. Sorry, means wildcard, but in the database, a star means multiply. Okay, so if I click on this, it's going to clear it and bring me back all my data, which is the same anyway. Similarly to filtering your data, you can search. So in here we have the ability to search. So if I click on the magnifying glass, these are the fields that are available to search on. So we have search on sample ID, specification. So if I have specification and put, I don't know what my specification was called, I think it does a partial search anyway, yeah, AC test spec. So it only brings back things that begin with AC or that have got AC in them. So having performed the search, you can then filter as well. So I could put in, so the search is bringing me back only AC test material or AC spec, and then the filter is bringing me back records which have got the value check in them as well. So you can use a combination of searching and filtering. If I clear the filter again, another thing we can do is we can save the search. So that's not a very interesting search. So say we had a search on status text, and I type in pending, it only brings back the samples of status P for pending. So yeah, I could put in new and it'll bring me back the new ones. So in the background, if we click on saved searches, you can see it's saying status text contains new. So that's what it's doing. But we then have the ability, if we use a search, to save this search. So if I click on Save Search, it says give it a name, so I'll call it new samples and save it. So now if I cancel the load, if I go to Load Records and Saved Search, I can clear this search, go to Saved Searches, New Samples is now available because I've saved it. So I can say Use Search, and then I go back to Commonly Selected Records and it performs the search, which means you can build up a collection of different saved searches and then just access them from here. So if I go back into here, in fact if I go back into Saved Searches and go Clear Saved Rules, finds me all my data again, and then I search on status text again. We're still in status text. I could put pending saved searches. I'm going to save that one as pending samples. So now I have two. I could say I want to run that one or I want to run that one. You can see this is doubled, and that's because we've still got the search here. So if I clear that, I can say status text contains new, use that one, and there's all the new samples. Or I can go status text contains pending, use search, and that shows all of those samples. If I close this screen, when you've got saved searches, if you right mouse click on Load Records, it shows you the name of any searches that you've saved. So now, instead of having to go into Load Records, click down on the search button to say I want to search on status text, blah blah, because I've already saved that search, I can just click on that and it automatically takes you to that screen, loads those records, and then you can say, all right, well, these are the records I want, or I want all of these records, and load it up as quickly as that. There's one more searching to show you in here, so I'm going to have to go out again to clear my loaded data and back in again. So bear with me for a moment, because one thing I've not shown you is there's another form of searching which doesn't use the load records. So right, back into sample registration. Obviously, normally you wouldn't have to go out and in again. It's just I'm trying to show you everything all in one go. So, slight pause while that loads again. Right, okay, so we're back in the sample manager. So if I was to type in, if I know what my sample ID is, so I'm going to type in my sample ID, 1, 2. If I go to Load Records, it automatically loads that record into our search criteria. So I click on that, confirm selection, and then it finds me that data. So if you know what your sample ID is, you can type in some data into here, or in other fields as well. Go to Load Records and it'll automatically load it up for you. Second time it doesn't do it. Okay, so I think I've just about covered everything. So we've looked at commonly selected records, full database search, which a lot of the time is blocked unless you search for a smaller data set. So that only brings back 49 records, or 30 records. If I click on that, I can see them all, but actually there's not much advantage at that point. We can save searches, which we can then run by highlighting them and going use search, or we can use them by right mouse clicking on load records, selecting it and saying OK. You notice that because I've got search 49 here, it's actually combined the two together. If I go to saved searches, it's saying status text contains pending and sample ID contains 49. So if you wanted to search on multiple fields, that's one way of doing it. Save one search and then apply the second search on top of it. Okay, so I'll go back to here. I think that just about covers everything. So if you've got any questions, I'm quite happy to answer some questions now. Otherwise, thank you very much for having a look in and refreshing your memory on how